Hi, everybody. We are at 2 p.m. Eastern Time here on Thursday, April 23rd. My name is Roger Burnett, Social Good Promotions. I will be your host for today's program. We're going to give about 90 more seconds to allow for potential new guests to join us. And then as soon as we have allowed that 90 seconds to expire, I will begin the presentation. So if you could just bear with us for just 1 second while we allow for our new participants to join us so that we have a full house before we get started. I will be right back with you. Okay, let's get started. So as we mentioned, this is Fast Start Success Strategies. Thank you for joining us. Thought we might start with a little bit of levity. For those of you who have been under a shelter in place order, many of us have come to realize that our ability to maintain our sanity and oftentimes is measured in the amount of available square feet that we have without someone else impinging upon our space. So my wish to you today as we begin our presentation is that you have ample square feet to be able to afford you the opportunity to not have the stress that some other folks may have had in the process of dealing with the situation. So congratulations if you've given yourself ample opportunity to have the square feet that you need in order to maintain your sanity. That's certainly one of the most important parts of this for sure. And then I wanted to take a moment to also thank all of the first responders out there, be it if you yourself are a first responder or an essential employee who have been going out on the front lines every day on behalf of all of us so that we can do what it is that we need to do from the safety of our homes. Or perhaps if you have a member of your family who's doing the same on behalf of myself and everybody else that I know, I want to say thank you for that. We know just how important those efforts are in keeping our economy afloat. And without all of you doing what you're doing, I really don't know where we would be. So once again, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for doing that. And for those of the rest of us who perhaps don't have one of those situations going on, or for those of us who have not been dealing with any specific family member or someone close to us who has had to deal with the illness, our attention is starting to turn away from the actual pandemic itself and more towards what's going on with the reopening of the economy so that we can prepare ourselves in a way that would allow us the fastest possible re-entry that we as business people might have once the powers that be have told us that that is something that we are capable of doing. So in keeping with that, I wanted to share with all of you what you may be feeling, which is the same as which is just like the Great Recession. What are we going to call this period of time when we were all under our shelter in place order? I'm picking the Great Pause. And in a lot of ways, what I've seen in my conversations with people that really during the Great Pause, for most of us in the early stages of it, our only real expectations was being able to survive it and then somehow advance through the process that would allow us to get through to the other side, regardless of what that ultimately would look like. And I feel like if this was a movie, that it would absolutely have to have been directed by Quentin Tarantino, because I just can't imagine anybody else being able to tell this bizarre story in a way that would be worthy of the big screen. And it certainly feels like Tarantino would be able to do it. So hopefully one day we will see something like that. But as we consider the re-entry into the economy, I bet you many of us are feeling a lot like what happens at the beginning of the Kentucky Derby. We all, regardless of what was happening for our businesses and our individual marketplaces where we compete in the past, whether we were ahead of people or if we were behind people, what the pause has created for most of us who are not in essential positions is the opportunity for all of us to come back to a similar starting position, so that when those gates open, it gives those of us who have a fast start, regardless of the size of our business or the resources that we may have at our disposal, perhaps an opportunity to be able to get out of the gates just a little bit more quickly than everybody else that will be competing against us. So by doing that, we give ourselves the best possible opportunity to have a fast start. And if horse racing isn't your bag, perhaps NASCAR is. So we all know what the feeling of anticipation is in the run up to whatever race it is that we have competed in, regardless of whether it's a horse race, a car race, or anything else that you do where you measure your own performance against that of others. We obviously have a lot of pent up energy, and we're looking forward to what this reopening of the economy might look like. So as we are anticipating that, I expect that we have a lot of pent up demand and excitement around what that might look like. But before we get into what we might do with that pent up demand, I think it would be wise for us to take a moment and spend some time looking at what was going on in the labor market right before all of this happened. And even though it's been a bit now, about 5 or 6 weeks since everything sort of shut down, it hasn't been so long that we don't remember just what an incredibly tight labor market we were dealing with in the days and the weeks and the months leading up to what happened. While there were more unemployed than there were available jobs, what we did recognize in the labor market in the pre-pandemic era was the skilled trades that were necessary for the open jobs. There really weren't any skilled tradespeople to be able to do that work. So there was a gap between the available jobs and the people who didn't have work that was going to require training in order for those people to be able to fill those positions. So for those of you who were looking to fill roles, oftentimes your best bet to be able to do that was to recruit talent away from your competition, which meant in many instances that you had to offer them a package that was greater than what they were already getting from their existing employer, which meant that you had to be really competitive and work really hard to be able to fill those open spots. And in many instances, we knew business owners that were clamoring for more headcount in order to be able to capitalize on the enormous opportunity that they had in that period prior to the pandemic. So it was a very tight market, very difficult situation to try to find people. And then March happened. 22 million people since March 14th have filed for an unemployment claim. These statistics were as of April 14th. So now at April 24th, my expectation is that these numbers are higher yet. But what we've witnessed is a growth in unemployment percentage as an overall total of the workforce from under 1% to approaching 5%. And while that's on the surface important, really, if you start to dig into some of the statistics, what you come to realize is that there are certain sectors of the economy that are at risk. And then there are clearly certain states within our union that are being affected by this in disproportionate ways that perhaps the rest of the country isn't experiencing, including Michigan, where I live, where we had, as of a few weeks ago, 21% of the state's population had filed for unemployment. I suspect that that number would be closer to 25, 26% if we were to look at that today. So while the national unemployment rate is somewhere around 4.4 to 5%, some states, including Michigan, are dealing with 4 and 5 times that problem. And then if you were to look at the nature of the way that this pandemic hit us and what it did to our economy in comparison to years past and other situations that we've had to deal with historically, this is affecting certain vertical markets within our economy disproportionately as opposed to what we've seen in disasters of the past. So if you look at the categories and the vertical markets that are most susceptible to what's going on, it's really a reflection of our stay-at-home order. Where you look at the first 2 categories are dedicated to the movement of people and product around the United States and abroad, which obviously with us all sitting at home and the world largely idled as well, what you're witnessing is just a complete drop off in those particular sectors to the point that it's causing a tremendous amount of heartache in those particular categories. And then The bottom two obviously are related to healthy economies where people are traveling, seeing the world, spending the dollars that a healthy economy provides us. And obviously that's all ground to a complete halt. So those sectors are reeling from what's going on to the degree where we're looking at, as of the time Brookings put this together, we're looking at about 25 million jobless people across the United States, and as much as 17% of our total job force are faced with the potential of the jobs that they had when they left not being there when they come back. So you think about the ramifications of that, what it really represents in many ways for lots of us is what we'll call the Great Reset. And what we see in eras of prosperity, like that 10-year uninterrupted period of prosperity that we just exited, is a movement away from a people-first strategy and perhaps a migration towards putting the economics of your business ahead of what's going on with your people. And during this reset, with as many people unemployed as there are, and our historical evidence that suggests that during periods like these, there typically is a correction where we rearrange that again and move people ahead of the economy in what's important. We expect that that should be the case in this particular instance as well. And we're built a lot of what we're going to talk to you about today around the notion that that will be what will happen. And if this was also being adapted for screenplay, my expectation is that you would find someone like a Nicholas Sparks of the Notebook fame, who would probably write something just a little bit kinder and gentler and a little bit more focused on emotion than necessarily on exactly what's happened. So I think Nicholas Sparks would be the perfect person to be responsible for crafting that for the big screen. But really what we're talking about is, in many ways, with what has happened as far as the number and quantity of people that are going to be looking for something else to do, we're really looking at the single largest human capital reset in most of our lives. Most people working today are not Depression era. For those that are, they will certainly recognize this in many ways, shapes and forms. But for the rest of us who've not had to deal with it to this degree, this really does represent the single largest human capital reset that really has ever happened. And it has all kinds of ramifications for you, both in what you do for a living, but also what you do as an employer, and also what you do as a customer. It's going to be wide-ranging effects, and we want to consider those and try to give you a framework that you can use to try to capitalize on that reset. And as we move ourselves back into the business of doing business, it's going to give you that opportunity to get that leg up. So let's dive into it. These are fast start success strategies, and hopefully I'm going to give you the framework by which you can then apply to your own business to give you the opportunity to get off to that fast start. So as is the case, if we say that this is going to be a people-centric movement, what we would say to you is start with the humanity, think about what's gone on from a personal perspective, and really spend some time in introspection and reflection around how this has affected you and what your belief is at this very moment about the ways that it's changed your belief about things. Because you're going to need to be able to communicate that, especially if you're in a leadership position. The people that are looking to you as they return to gainful employment, one of the first things they're going to want to understand is what kind of environment are they returning to with respect to an ability to communicate their feelings. And if you start out by being able to communicate your own feelings and the way that this has affected you in an open and honest and transparent way, what you're really doing is setting the bar for everyone else to feel comfortable to do the same. If you're not creating that environment, there may be people that you're going to rely on for productivity that your expectations may be unrealistic given their specific circumstances. So by starting with being able to communicate that about yourself, you're creating an environment for people to feel comfortable doing the same. And by creating that environment for those that are working both with you and for you, what you then do is you make a welcoming culture for those that are outside of your four walls, because there's going to be dynamics that you're going to have to deal with that are going to be really, really important for you to consider once you go beyond what's happened to you and what's happened to your employees, be it direct employees who work for you, subcontractors that are 1099 employees for you, freelancers, gig employees. You really think about the totality of people that you pay to do work for you it's going to be really important for you to have an understanding of how all of those people have been affected before you really even try to take one step forward. Once you've done that and you've really gotten that square with yourself and your employees, the first place that you're going to want to look outside your four walls is into your supplier base. The people that you do work with on a day in and day out basis, who either provide you the raw materials to do the work that you do, to make the things that people give you money for, or the service providers who help underpin the organization and the things that you rely on in order to be able to do your work. There's been any changes in those ranks, you're going to want to know that, because it's going to be vitally important for you to pinpoint and focus on those areas where you may have a gap in your supply chain in the short term, so that you can address that just as quickly as you possibly can to get off to that fast start that we've been talking about. And then lastly, and certainly not least important, will be the community in which you live and work. By taking a look at what's going on around you in the larger community as a whole, you're going to have a sense of if there have been a change in economic conditions that may have an adverse effect on your business. For instance, in downtown areas like downtown Brighton, Michigan, if you have a restaurant in downtown Brighton and you come back to an environment where you recognize that 3 or 4 of your neighbor businesses have somehow had to cease operation, and one of those businesses or more of them were responsible for foot traffic for your business, that could probably represent a loss in revenue that you're going to want to be aware of on day one, so that you can factor in some strategies to try to help replace that lost revenue that the changes in the economic condition in your community have required of you. And then more importantly, think about the people that you sell to in the community, and then the people that they then take what you do and deliver it to their customers and prospects. If there's been a material change, say if you call in the hospitality arena, and that has been devastated, you're going to want to understand how changes in that environment are going to affect what's going to happen to your customers that you're supplying as they're trying to do what it is that they do. So by getting your arms around humanity first, you're really giving yourself the opportunity to create an environment that is authentic and transparent, and creates an environment to allow people to do the same, to create the opportunity for safety and security for those that really comprise what it is that you do on a day in, day out basis, so that you can then move forward in some of these important decision makings that really should follow a timeline. So I've established this timeline here for re-entry that really has 5 distinct categories, and then a 6th one that I want to touch on at the end that I feel like is as important, or perhaps even more important, than some of the foundational elements that we'll lay out in these 5 buckets in the timeline for re-entry. So I'm going to cover these each one by one, and then we will look to see how these apply as a strategy for your re-entry once you've considered the elements on their own. So first and foremost, what I would say is we've got to think about a timeline. And as the state of Michigan stands today, we haven't had any new guidance to tell us if this has changed. What Governor Whitmer has told us up until this point, that the Michigan Stay Safe, Stay Home order expires in about a week. So what that means for us is there's a period of time after the stay-at-home order is lifted, and after we've been given the guidelines on what that's going to mean, that will allow us the opportunity as individual business people to then decide, based on when that restriction is lifted and what the guidelines are, what our actual timeline is going to be on an individual level to reopen our business in a way that we feel confident about. And so from today, April 23rd, until whatever day that is that you've decided is going to be the day that you're going to flip the switch and announce to the world that your business is open for business again, really represents the period of time that you have available to dedicate to this exercise of creating this fast start strategy for yourself, so that when you hit the ground, you're not using the day that you reopen your business as the day to start thinking about what it is that you're going to do, but rather the day that you open your business is going to be the day you start executing on the strategy that you've aligned for yourself or created for yourself, so that you can hit that ground running. So whatever period of time that is, let's decide what that is right now. And then what I don't want you to do is get so focused on that date that if for some reason it gets extended, that, or even if we return to a stay-at-home order, which is possible, that you don't get discouraged. What you really would want to see is any additional time that you've been given beyond what the original expectations for are actually a gift and not a burden. That gift being you have additional time to devote to the priorities that you've created in this timeline and be able to actually create more executables for yourself on your fast start strategy if you do happen to get delayed. So don't get wrapped up in the dates so much. Get wrapped more up in the timeline and the projects that you need to complete and the prioritization that you need to go through in order to be able to come out the other side with the best skill set necessary to get that fast start. And then a couple more things to consider. You know, there's statistical evidence that suggests that any new habit takes about 14 days before it takes hold. So you're going to have to get into the habit of these new activities and the new practices that you're going to use as part of your strategy. So why not get started now? Give yourself those 14 days or as close to 14 days as you can prior to announcing that you're back in business to allow those habits to take hold so that if the world suddenly starts to spin off its axis again, you've established your new routine in a way that perhaps can hold up under the pressure of whatever's going to happen to us when we get back together. Prioritize your highest value activities during this timeline and then get started on those activities. But what I want you to recognize is that we're human beings and we are going to over prioritize. It's okay. Don't be ashamed of it. You're going to throw a bunch into these buckets if you stay focused on the exercise. Realize that you may not get to everything and that is completely fine. You can continue to use this timeline even after you reopen your business because you will have established the set of priorities in each of these categories that are necessary for you to be able to continue to work on your business even after your business has reopened. So by establishing that, knowing that it's okay to borrow from other buckets of priority if necessary in order to get some of these things done, gives you the best possible chance for success and also gives you the best comfort in knowing that if you don't get to everything, it's not the end of the world. So once we've moved past our dates, we got to look at our fires. What's on fire right now? And what's the biggest fire and what are the biggest threats that those fires represent to your ability to get back at it quickly? Were you employing people? How many people did you employ? When you let them go, did you furlough them? Was it an elimination of the positions? What exactly did you do for those people that were already helping you do the business of your business? As they come back, one of the things that you have to recognize in that there are 22 million or more Americans who are looking for a job right now, there's a distinct possibility that some subset of the people who used to work for you, gig employees, freelancers, or employees of your organization who actually draw a W-2, it just might not come back. And if they're not coming back, what this gives you a tremendous opportunity to decide is, would you refill that position with another headcount? Would you redistribute that work amongst other employees? Or might this be the chance for you to replace that headcount with an outsourced resource that you do not have to then reassume as an additional headcount for your business? Oftentimes, those are difficult positions when you have someone in a job. But when you're reimagining what your future looks like, this might be a great opportunity for you to remix the distribution of work and add some folks that are outside of your four walls to help you get the work done on a day in and day out basis so that you don't have to necessarily replace those people if you don't believe that you need to. This gets back to the supplier base too. If you've got people in your supplier base that you find out during this period of pause that they're just not going to be back, or what's probably most likely is that there's going to be people amongst your supplier base that are going to come back, but they're going to come back on a different timeline than the one that you have. And if you're going to have a gap where there's suppliers who aren't necessarily going to be able to help you in the short term, then you need to use this time on pause to be able to figure out some fill-in strategies that are going to help you so that you can get off to that fast start that you're hoping for. And this is the other time that if you had a supplier that you were holding on to that maybe wasn't getting the job done to the best of their ability, but you didn't really have a lot of opportunity to consider a replacement for them because you were just busy getting orders out the door, again, you're on pause. This would be a great opportunity for you to reach out to replacement suppliers for that mediocre supplier and interview them about their ability to maybe replace that supplier that maybe wasn't getting the job done for you in the way that you had hoped. I'm guessing that that alternative supplier would be eager for the conversation, and they may be even willing to give you a little bit better deal than they would have given you to get your business in the past. So this would be a great time during that pause to evaluate where there's suppliers that you may want to evaluate. And then last, but certainly not most importantly, not least, is how do you need to change your physical workplace in a way that's going to be a reflection of how the rules have changed? Because my expectation is that if you had a certain number of people allowed in your office per the fire marshal, those rules are probably going to be different now going back, and you're going to need to understand how to apply those new rules to the way that your business goes about doing its work. There's a million ways that you consider that. Simple things like signage within your workplace. What are you going to need to communicate to people in a way that they can see on a regular basis so that they don't forget? What other policies and procedures are you going to put in place as far as how you want people interacting with one another? Are you going to change and stagger the shifts? Are you going to reimagine your workday? Are you going to reimagine your work week? Are you going to allow people to work certain days from home and certain days in the office? All of these things should be things that you're considering, especially within the context of when you go back to work. If you've got that figured out already, it makes it far easier to be drafting the plan and reconfiguring that floor plan now with the help of somebody that can assist you in that process instead of waiting until you get back to what you're doing to try to figure that out. So all of these things are going to be vitally important. Again, you're going to want to prioritize what's most important and stack rank these things in order of importance so that you're not doing things that necessarily aren't the most important thing. Next stage is your money. I'm not going to talk to you about profit and loss, balance sheet, all of those things, day sales outstanding. I'm expecting that you know how to run a good business. What I want you to think about is within the context of borrowing and leverage, this is oftentimes a point of really high anxiety for people. And the idea of going out and actually borrowing money right now in times of uncertainty is a very difficult and nervous proposition for a lot of people. What I would say to you is this is an unprecedented time when it comes to the amount of credit available, and the terms seem to be as relaxed as they may have ever have been. And I know there's going to be some complaints about, well, I can't seem to get my hands on any of this money, and there's a lot of uncertainty around whether or not it's even something I can have as a business owner. But that's not the only source of revenue, and that certainly shouldn't be the only place that you're looking for a chance to use resources that you may have. Because if you can't get your hands on them, doesn't mean you're sunk. What you need to be thinking about, are there other potential investors that you might be able to tap for resources if you were able to present to them a smart business plan that would represent a growth strategy for you and also a return for them as an investor in the short term. Interest rates are practically zero, so people with money aren't getting any real return in that marketplace, and the stock market is crazy. So there may be people who would be willing to make an investment with cash assets that they have in a business like yours with a smart business plan. If you have a strong relationship with your banker, there's a lot of money available, a lot of liquidity available, and really what you have to think about is leverage. Because in times like these, when everyone else is running out, you as an investor should be considering, is there an opportunity for you to buy something at a discount that maybe might transform your business in a way that would make you better than you were before all of this happened? Because the likelihood of what you would have had to have paid prior to this happening in order for that to occur, as opposed to what you would pay now, I can assure you, you should be able to get that at a discount now in comparison to what you would have had to have paid just as recently as 6 months ago. So by factoring that into your equation, unlike growing your business by getting new accounts, the opportunity to be able to expand your capacity or capability to be able to bring in new revenue streams oftentimes can outpace any new business that you may get as a result of what it is that you do on a day in and day out basis. And then last, but certainly not least, is in whatever marketplace that you're in, there may be competitors of yours that are struggling financially who may be willing to consider a new arrangement that in days and weeks and months past, they would have never been willing to consider. I would tell you that I've seen a lot of that happen in my industry, even in the last 5 weeks. Conversations that I would have never hoped or expected would have happened in this interim period. And I think that makes it a very unique and interesting time, because if you have good credit and you have the opportunity to build some leverage and have some resources available to you, and you turned your eye to the competitive marketplace, I think there's an opportunity for you to come out of this larger and more vibrant and more robust, either from technology and capabilities perspective, or as far as the number of people who are actually working for your organization, if you put an effective strategy in place to be able to try to do that. So definitely consider all of those things and what that leverage might mean to you. And then from a team perspective, I suspect that there's never been a more important time for a business person to have strong relationships with things like a banker and a lawyer and a tax pro and an accountant and a media person and a PR and marketing representative. If you don't have strong relationships in all of these categories, I suspect that you're feeling the pain of not having those more so now than maybe you had just prior to this when the economy was going gangbusters. So if you've not developed these relationships, now would be a great time for you to consider that. And again, these professionals are sitting at home in much the same way as you, with the exception of the banker and the tax people who are really busy right now, but everybody else would be very, very excited to hear from you and probably willing to offer you a little bit of an incentive to have that conversation. On top of that, there are 3 categories that I think that you should add to this equation that maybe you've not thought before. If you're trying to transform your business and you don't have someone that's an accountability or success coach for you to help you on this journey, what a great time to consider adding that to your team. There's a lot of people who suffered through the '08 Great Recession who transitioned into coaching roles that are veterans of situations like this, who would be able to provide you a lot of guidance on what this means and how you can get yourself back on track just as quickly as you can from a personal accountability perspective. It's a chaotic and stressful time. And if you struggle with trying to keep your wits about you, a mindfulness coach and a meditation guide and the starting of a practice like that, I would tell you would be tremendously valuable. If you were to look around your peer group, and if there are people who just seem to be handling it really well, I bet you if you were to ask them, there would be at least some subset of them who are practicing mindfulness and meditation and can attribute that to their ability to cope with this stress in a healthy way at this point. And then last, but certainly not most important, or certainly not least, and maybe most importantly, is the referral team. I'm in 2 of them. I would tell you that they are incredibly valuable in times like these, because while most of the people in the marketplace that I live and work in kind of bunkered in and sat it out and waited for whatever was happening, these referral teams immediately shifted into mastermind mode and doubled down on trying to help one another with their own businesses. And I think it's by virtue of the work that those referral teams are doing for one another that actually will see them come out even stronger, more nimble, and ready to tackle the day when the restrictions are lifted, as opposed to the people who have chosen not to do that. So if you're not participating in a referral team, reach out to me. I can certainly help you find one that might make sense for you. And then assets, I think it's going to be incredibly important for you to be able to show your work at this stage of the game, which means if you're going to tell a message to people about what it is that you can do for them, it's never been more important for you to be able to have stuff that they can see and read and watch and listen to that's a reflection of what you're explaining to them, of what your value proposition could be for them in this moment. And if there's inconsistencies between what it is that you would usually give to someone and what it is that you're actually telling people in this moment, in that instance, when someone says to you, hey, I'm really excited about what it is that you're talking about, can you send me some more information on that? If what you send them is not a reflection of what you said, whatever little credibility that you've built with them has a way of quickly getting eroded. So it's important for you to spend time during the pause considering the assets that you have, the tone of them, the message that they convey, and whether or not they're actually doing the job and saying the same thing that you're saying in front of people. It's going to be vitally important for you to revise that stuff and make it so that's the case. And then secondarily, take a look at where you're communicating your message. There's a million platforms out there. So if your message has been spread out and it's disconnected and there's inconsistencies in what you tell people across these platforms, now might be the time for you to reconsider which platforms are the ones that are working best for you, which are the ones that really aren't getting the job done, and where do you really want to continue moving forward in the places that you're going to broadcast the information about what it is that what you do and what makes you different. Once you've done that, if you've focused on your content assets and you focused on the platforms in which you're going to communicate, really then you can spend the rest of the time developing a strategy around how frequently you're going to communicate, what information it is that you're going to share on which platforms, and who are the audiences that you're trying to engage with in each of those, because then you can work on a timeline going forward that tells you the frequency of content and what it is that you really need to be broadcasting on a schedule that you can stick to. It makes things infinitely easier. And by spending time in pause right now, reviewing your assets and really getting it dialed in a way that you're going to be proud of when things start up again, you're going to be able to hit the ground running in ways that most of your competitors are not going to be able to. And then lastly, there's this put yourself out of business at the bottom that I'm talking about. There are a couple people that you compete against that are doing things that are just a pain in your butt. And what you need to be thinking about is, are there ways that you could reimagine that part of what you do in a way that can counter the strategy that is being disruptive to you right now? And if so, what a great opportunity for you to be able to work on a strategy to do that. And if you've done the work to build up a team of people, of professionals that have expertise, you can really rely on them to help you put the pieces and parts together of whatever that counter strategy is that you're going to employ for whatever it is that's disrupting your business. And then secondarily, if there are things that you believe that you've wanted to do, kind of in the vein of additional technology or capability, but if there's something that you know would disrupt some of your competitors, if you just had the time and the energy and the resources to be able to do it, now would be the time to start putting that plan together. And you may not be able or ready to execute on it when the restrictions are lifted, but you will have taken a quantum leap towards getting yourself in position to be able to at some future date. And what a great thing that you'd be able to point to is saying, I was able to use my time in pause to move my business forward in a really substantial way. All of these pieces and parts, again, require prioritization. They require analysis. And what they really require is a stack ranking to know, where do you really have the biggest fires and where are the places that you feel like you can have the biggest impact if you were to focus your attention right now on doing that. On top of all of that, there's a foundational premise built on trust that I want to spend some time on that I think is going to be really important. And if you agree with me in this notion that perhaps the economics of things are going to take a backseat to the people, then certainly trust is where you're going to want to build your strategy, because people obviously are going to gravitate towards places and individuals that they feel like are incredibly trustworthy, because there's going to be so many choices available to them and so many options that in many ways it's going to be paralyzing to the average person. So if you can show them an element of trust and use that as the foundation of everything that you do in the strategy, it's going to give you an absolute leg up on the competition, because many people will not start at that foundational level. They'll be thinking more at the transactional level, and that may not necessarily get the job done. I think it's a universal truth that we all agree that people buy from people they know, like, and trust. And I'm not sure whether or not Joel Comm was the first one to say that or not, but I think what we can mostly recognize and agree on is that this is either a cliche or a universal truth, whichever way you want to look at it. But in reality, what we know is that this is really true. But what I think most people don't recognize is that the journey from know to like to trust is not a straight line. I even gave a talk about this on LinkedIn about a month and a half ago about why know, like, and trust is not linear. It's actually more of a journey. And if you ever are interested, please hit me up on LinkedIn and feel free to go check that out. 1,200 people so far have spent the time with it, and I've gotten a lot of positive feedback. That's 6 minutes long. This is an hour. Maybe you get the same amount of information in 6 minutes. But what I really want you to consider is that for most people, the journey to know, like, and trust, for most people, they believe it to be more like downhill skiing. And I don't know about you, but there's not a lot of people in the world who have never done downhill skiing before that suddenly, in the face of a crisis, would decide to go to a ski hill, strap 2 boards to their feet, and hurtle down a really steep hill covered with snow without any practice or any previous chance of even knowing what it is that they're doing. So many of us won't even get on the ski lift, much less get to the top of the hill. And even for those of us who are brave enough to consider this possibility, it's really because of the idea that perhaps this is a momentum builder for my business. And if I were to overcome my fear or be willing to fall down a few times and maybe embarrass myself in the process, that if I just get over my fear, then I'm going to have a good possibility to building up momentum with people that should get my business off to a good start and find me starting to build these trust-based relationships with people that should sustain my business for the long term. I don't know how you feel about that analogy. I completely disagree. I actually believe that the strategy looks more like this. So when you are on the journey towards trust, instead of it being a scary, somewhat uncertain scenario and exercise that you feel like you have to adopt this entirely new skill set, in my mind, which I think you have to recognize, is that the journey to trust is actually more of a climb. And instead of having to overcome your fear of being scared of what might happen when you make the journey, actually it's a commitment to the journey that you need to make, and a commitment to what's necessary in order to make the climb from no to like, to that holy grail, which is really the top of the highest pyramid, which is trust. And I think for most people, if it's not a matter of fear, it's just like everything else that stands in the way of us starting something that seemingly isn't that difficult. It's the willingness to commit to the activities that are necessary to make the climb that oftentimes stops many of us from doing this. And I'm hoping that what I'm giving you from a framework perspective will help you get over this fear and allow you the freedom to make this choice to want to start the climb towards trust, because the only thing that we can assure you is that something like this will happen again in the future. We don't know how long it will be, but what we know historically is that there are always moments like this in the evolution of our economy. And if you've dedicated yourself to the climb, what you're hoping is in that moment that you have as many people as possible in the trust part of your triangle that's going to give you the ability to sustain your business when all of the things start to go sideways. I hope that makes intuitive sense to you, and I'm going to give you an opportunity later to learn more about that from me specifically if you think that that would be something that you would like to do. So when we're building relationships with people, what I would tell you is, more so now than ever, what you're going to want to do is to begin with every new interaction with every person, regardless of whether this is someone that you've known for years or whether it's someone you're meeting for the first time. What each of us needs to consider as we're approaching one of those interactions is where we are in our trust index with the person we're about to deal with, because this is a climb in much the same way as those pyramids that I described to you. But by understanding where you are in the climb, it gives you the ability to have some sense of understanding of what it is you should be doing with that person in this moment. So by creating an understanding of where that is, and by starting off your interactions with an analysis of where you are in that trust index, you can build the skills and use the assets that you have to your disposal to then be able to provide things to people to assist you in your journey up the index. So as we look at it, what we would say is the average relationship that you have with someone that is encountering you and your brand for the first time is not negative, it's just weak. They don't know a lot about you. They don't know a lot about your business. They're not exactly sure what it is that you do. So yeah, they understand that you are in business, and that's something that lots of people are, and that doesn't necessarily mean much to them at that stage of the game. As you're moving up, then you move from a weak relationship to a neutral relationship, where perhaps now they've seen your face a few times, they've seen your logo, they have some idea of what it is that you do for a living, but they've not been compelled yet to engage you in a way that might mean that they may give you some money at some point in the future. So you're still on the climb at this point. Once you've moved from that neutral relationship, the next step in the process is a strong relationship. So now they know who you are, they know what you do, they've interacted with your brand, they may have even given you some business. You're working towards a relationship with them that would be one of those top of the triangle relationships, but yet you haven't quite gotten over that hump because they can rely on you, but they haven't really learned that they can depend on you yet. And it's really that last movement from reliance to dependence that really represents the difference between a strong relationship and what I'll call ohana. For those of you who don't know what ohana is, it's an Hawaiian term that means family. And unlike the traditional North American term of family, which means blood relatives, in Hawaiian, ohana means the selected few that you've chosen to be your family, which includes your blood relatives, but most assuredly includes people that are not your blood siblings as well. And in Ohana, I would tell you, in what just happened, if your phone wasn't ringing for what you do from the people that you typically hear from, it's not that they weren't buying anything, it was they were only relying on the people who fall into Ohana category with them. And so it's your responsibility to continue to move yourself up that chain towards Ohana, and not necessarily focus just on the places where you have Ohana, because it's very comfortable for us to do that. It's really important for us to be building relationships in each of these categories in order to sustain our business for the long term. Because what we know in times of peril like this is that occasionally businesses that have been giving you business, they don't return because of a change in economic condition like the one that we just experienced. And if you're not building replacement relationships for situations like that when they occur, you leave yourself the opportunity to leave your business flat-footed, which nobody wants to do. One last point, you can have a negative relationship, and a negative relationship typically happens because of something. Unless someone just completely badmouthed you to someone, the likelihood of you starting with a negative relationship is really only predicated on if the person has some kind of moral problem with what you do. So absent that, you really do start at weak relationships. But what I want to point out here is if you're not paying attention to the people that perceive you negatively, you're missing out on an opportunity, because you need a strategy for the people who have a negative opinion of you. It's tone deaf to not hear the people who are criticizing you and trying to do something to help improve in a way that eliminates what some of those negative opinions might be creating. So what we want you to recognize is that regardless of what stage of the index that you happen to be in, if you know where you are with the other person, it gives you the opportunity to recognize what your responsibilities are in a pretty quick way. So if you have weak relationships that you're trying to move to a neutral relationship, well, we would tell you your responsibility in this moment would be to educate them, inform them, entertain them, or somehow inspire them in a way that creates even a weak emotional connection for them, so that what they say in their minds is, I see you. I may not need what you do right this very minute, but I see you. I feel what you're doing, and I'm going to make a mental note of some sort to get back to you if I find a change in condition that I feel like requires what it is that you do. There's really no better way for you to be able to create that opportunity for yourself than by doing one of these 4 things and creating some kind of positive correlation in their mind for themselves for your next interaction. You would expect that that might move you to a neutral relationship. And when you find yourself in those situations, really it's up to you then to look into your asset library and start figuring out the things that, because of your growing knowledge of this person and your growing understanding of what it is that they do and what their challenges are, that you can start to provide them things that do a little bit more of that same educational process. And really what you're trying to do is instill confidence in that person that you have some things of value to them, that if they find themselves trying to figure something out, that they start adding you into the list of people that they would go consult with passively, in a way that maybe you start to gain some capital with them as far as mind share is concerned. That should move you onto the precipice of a strong relationship. And once that happens, the nature of your conversations will start to turn. They'll start to ask you, hey, can you price out some things for me? Could you tell me what the structure of a relationship between the two of us might look like? Can you explain to me the way I would have to pay you, so that if I want to consider this at some point in the near distant future, I can budget for whatever it is that I might do with you? And it's those little signals that start to show you that you're moving up the trust index in a way that you're hoping for. And when you get to that strong moment, really what you're trying to do is pivot away from being a consultative salesperson and really being more like the caddy or a batting coach, or somebody who understands the skill set and the organizational responsibilities of the person that, or persons that you're dealing with at that company, and starting to arm them proactively with things that they may not even know they need yet. Can you imagine right now if you had some work from home strategies that you had already put in front of people in the event that maybe they pivoted to starting having their people work away from the office? Think about how valuable that would have been to people as they were trying to consider what it was that they were going to do in this very emotional decision that they were trying to make, as opposed to now when everyone's already at home and trying to sell them banners. Certainly they may want a banner, but now it feels like I'm just trying to capitalize on a situation as opposed to being someone that was arming them for what was a challenge that they were considering in that moment. And it's when you start to get those phone calls from people who want to collaborate with you because they know that you're going to come up with ideas like that on their behalf, that's really when you can say with confidence that you've gotten into that Ohana category. And that is the most awesome feeling in the world. But again, to get back to the pyramid analogy, if you've not done the work necessary to be able to have that moment, then when those opportunities present themselves, the quantity of people that you're going to have available to you to help sustain your business will be significantly smaller than if you've made that commitment to making the climb from no to like to trust. Rest assured, I'm telling you from personal experience that that's the case. There's one more element though that you need to consider on top of all of those things. So you figured out your fires, you know your finances, you got your business straight, your people are good. You've gone back to have conversations with people all along your trust index. But what you've got to recognize is that this pandemic and the shelter in place order that followed it has changed people. And what it's really done is it's revealed 3 distinct personality traits that have shown themselves to be very, very evident in this time of scarce resources or apparent scarce resources when it comes to all of us having to stay in the house. So there's helpers, there's hoarders, and there's hustlers. And I bet you if you're thinking about it, you know which category you fall in. And I bet you're going through a mental inventory right now of your family and your close friends and going, oh, that one's a helper and these 3 are hoarders and those 2 people are helpers. Because what you're going to want to know is, where are you in your trust index, and then what kind of personality are you dealing with? Because if you're a helper and they're a hoarder, doesn't mean that you can't work with one another, but certainly there's going to be different ways that you're going to want to interact with one another than if perhaps you're a helper and they're a helper. Or can a helper use a hustler? Boy, like nobody's business, because that means we can help more people if we got a hustler out there helping us do what it is we do. And can hustlers help hoarders? I think that makes perfect sense. So you can see how these things can be symbiotic in their relationship. So you got to factor this into what you're doing as well. And then lastly, you got to get to where you're going to place your bets, because there's going to be people in 3 different categories that are going to want to do business with you based on 3 different things. First and foremost, and I think what we're hoping, most of us are hoping for, is a business as usual strategy. So there's going to be people that were doing work with you in the past or were about to do work with you just before this happened. And they're going to want to pick up that relationship in a way that looks most like it has previous to that. And if you've completely transformed, that may be uncomfortable for them. So you may want to consider what your business as usual strategy is and the ways you're going to want to communicate what business as usual looks like to people, even if it means just reassuring and comforting them that they can do business with you in much the same way that they had done before anything changed. That will be reassuring to a lot of people. But there's 2 other categories that you've got to really spend some time considering, because like acquisitions and mergers and all of those things that we talked about from leverage, you're going to place some bets. There might be some categories that you can weight some of your bets into, that instead of just putting all of your money on a business as usual strategy, perhaps you might be able to realize some exponential growth by putting some money in the category of, if what you do has become more important to some sub-segment of your customer base, then you need to be out there calling on all of those people in that part of your customer base who hadn't considered you before because you were a nice to have, and suddenly you've become a need to have. Those people are probably going to realize that as they come back to work, that there's going to be some things that have changed for them that they're going to need immediately. And if you can be in a position to capitalize on that, and you've shown them that you're a trustworthy individual, the opportunity for them to change their opinion about whether or not they should do business with you is going to happen right in that very moment. And you run the risk of being able to add some additional clients to your stable in that moment. And then the really big category is if there are people that, because of what this has caused in their particular business, that they've just got to reimagine the way they do things, and you have the opportunity to be able to be of strategic benefit to them. This is your chance to be able to show them in this moment what it is that you're capable of doing. And if you are in the neutral to strong part of your trust index with them already, and they've expressed a desire to you to be transformational in this moment, it is go time for you. And if you've created a lot of content and stuff that allows you to show your work about how you can help them do that in this moment, these are usually your biggest ticket engagements, and they can have a really transformative effect on your business as well. So have the courage to be able to place some bets in these categories, but do the analysis now and pause and spend some time brainstorming about where do you think those categories exist, where people are going to either see you as a need to have now, or people who have strong trust relationship with you who are going to transform their businesses. Those are two really strong opportunities for you to spend some time and resources on to help make your business get that fast start that you're looking for. I'm excited to see when that happens, because I have an expectation that for some businesses out there paying attention to this, that they're going to come back and tell us later that this really was a time of massive growth for their organizations. So if this is exciting to you and you believe that you too want to try to get off to a fast track success, I'm going to offer you my services as well so that you have the best opportunity to do that. The 2 infographics are going to be available to you if you just reach out to me and ask for downloads of those. I'm going to share those with you as PDFs so that you have those as reminders as you're thinking about what it is you're going to do with your business. If you want to spend some time with me talking about this and exploring the categories because you feel like you need a guided tour of that, let's book a 1-hour session with me at no charge, and I'll help walk you through those 5 categories and have you think about what it is that you may need to do in the fires, assets, finances categories in order to help you get through that early stage process. And then if you identify some real opportunities that you believe that you can actually strike while the iron's hot, if you want to engage me for 5 more hours to help flesh that out in a way that you feel like you can take to the street, then we'll give you some deliverables and we'll work on a plan that you know exactly what it would be that you would get at the end of those 5 hours. And I'll charge you the drastically discounted rate of $500 to do that. And then lastly, if you are in the transformation stage, like we described in the previous slide, where you just want to out with the old, in with the new, and you want to help me lead you through that process, I'll give you, there's a 20-hour block of time that I typically use, and we'll discount that to $5K, give you the chance to really dig in hard to this and come out with something that you absolutely could take to market and some strategies in the playbook that you'd be able to use as well. So that's by and large what we've got. I'm going to open it up to Doug Moffitt, who may want to have a question for me or any feedback at this moment. And absent that, if Doug doesn't have any questions, I will say thank you for your time. And Doug, what do you think? Okay. Having said that, I very much appreciate your time. It was really fun sharing this with you. If there's any information here that you would like to share with me independent of this discussion, please feel free to reach out. You can see all my contact information below. And also, I would direct you to the Social Good Promotions website. At the bottom, there's a tab called So Good Supply Company. These So Good interviews are our example of the EIEI platform, the Educate, Inform, Entertain, and Inspire. This is our attempt to do that for you. We're hoping that you'll fall in love with one of the brand's stories that you hear from our supplier base. And when you're ready to put some product with your company logo on it, that you will reach back out to us and you will already know which one of these brands you want to support with your own purchase. And together we will make the world a better place. Thanks so much for your time today. I really appreciated having you, and I look forward to hearing from each one of you individually in the future.